Okay, today we're going to talk about the third branch of government, and that is the judicial branch. So the legislative branch makes the laws, the executive branch enforces or carries out the laws, and the judicial branch interprets the laws. And think of the word interpret kind of like an interpreter takes a foreign language and interprets it into English or vice versa. Well, the judicial branch does a similar thing with the laws, because the way laws are written, they can be just honestly very confusing and difficult to understand what it actually means. And so the judicial branch interprets the laws and applies them to situations in a way that makes sense. So the judicial branch is basically the court system. We, at the federal level, we have the Supreme Court. That's the highest court in the land. Once a case is heard by the Supreme Court and they make their decision, that's it. There's no other place to go. That's why the Supreme Court is called the court of last resort. There are 9 justices on the Supreme Court. They're called judges or justices. And there are 9 judges because they need an odd number so that when they rule on cases, there will always be a winner. It'll be 5-4, 6-3, but it will never be a tie. That's why there is an odd number. Originally, there were, I think, 5 members of the Supreme Court, and then there were 7, and then they upped it to the 9 that we have now. And the reason for the increase of Supreme Court justices is because as our country has grown and expanded, so to have our problems or issues that have come up, and things can get pretty complicated. And so the mindset is that the more individuals you have thinking about a case, deliberating, considering it, the better result or outcome you will have. So that's why we have 9 justices on the Supreme Court. So how do they get their jobs? It is a 2-step process, very similar to how the cabinet members get their position. The first step is that when a position becomes available, the president, who's ever in office at that time, gets to pick somebody. And then to make sure that the president is picking qualified, good people to be on the Supreme Court, the Senate approves those presidential appointments. So that is the exact same process that cabinet members go through to get their positions. As far as requirements, it's kind of crazy. There are no requirements. There's no age requirement. There's no citizenship requirement. There's no job requirement. You don't even have to be a lawyer. Now, are most of those people lawyers? Yes, absolutely. But officially, there are no rules. And also, to have the qualifications and to have the experience needed to get to the level of the United States Supreme Court, you're going to be in your 50s. I believe the youngest Supreme Court member that was appointed was about 48 years old. Now, this is the other crazy part, is that they are elected, or excuse me, not elected. They're not elected, they're appointed for a life term. So once you are appointed to the Supreme Court, that's it. That is the job for the rest of your life. Now, if the president asks you to be on the Supreme Court, can you say no? Absolutely. You might say, hey, Mr. or Mrs. President, it's a great honor. Thank you for thinking of me, but I know this is a lifetime commitment and I just don't want to do that for the rest of my life. And so, yes, you can turn them down. And if the Senate does not approve of somebody that the president has picked, well, then the president picks somebody else. Now, let's talk about the circumstances in which a Supreme Court judge can be excused from the job. Well, obviously, if a Supreme Court member dies while they're serving on the Supreme Court, well, they're not going to have the job anymore. And then the president has the opportunity to pick someone new as the replacement. The other situation is if you are in failing health. So obviously, if you have cancer, are dying, for some health reason that you are no longer able to carry out the duties of being on the Supreme Court, they're going to relieve you of your job. Many years ago, we had a Supreme Court judge by the name of Sandra Day O'Connor, and her husband was in very ill health. He had Alzheimer's, if you're familiar with that disease. And she herself had served on the court for 20 or 25 years, and she asked the court if she could step down from service to take care of her husband, and they said yes, that was fine. So yes, there are some reasons you can leave, but let's say you're on the job for 5 years and all of a sudden you decide, this isn't what I want to do anymore. They're going to say, no, that's not the way it works. you're on the Supreme Court for quite a while. And so life term, and that's, but I can talk a little bit about how many cases. Let's see, the Supreme Court hears about 75 to 100 cases a year. They are typically cases that challenge the Constitution or disputes between the states. For example, if I get a divorce or something like that, my divorce is not going to go to the Supreme Court. That's not the kind of court cases they take. It's really big cases that challenge people's rights, that are challenges to the Constitution. So that's about it. So anything you want to know about the judicial branch can be found in Article 3 of the United States Constitution. Thanks for watching.